My name is Meriel Ashford, and at 70, I've learned that silence can bruise more than words. I've lived my whole life beside Lake Champlain, in the same cedar-framed house where my late husband and I once hosted Thanksgiving dinners filled with noise, music, and too much pie. This year, the only thing that filled the room was tension. Clark, my son 44, ambitious, and always slightly impatient, carved the turkey with the precision of a man dissecting a contract. His wife, Elise, kept refilling everyone's glasses as if politeness could keep peace afloat. The grandchildren whispered to each other, thumbs flicking over their phones beneath the table. I had roasted and basted and smiled. But the moment came, as I somehow knew it would. Clark set down the carving knife and said, "Mom, about the cabin, it just makes sense if you transfer it now, simplifies inheritance. Less tax for everyone later." I wiped my hands on the napkin. The kind embroidered with my initials. It's my name on the deed. Clark. And I'd like it to stay that way. He smiled the way people do before they deliver an insult wrapped as reason. You're being stubborn. After all I've done for you, your bills, the repairs, everything, you could be a little more grateful. That word, ungrateful. It landed harder than the wind beating the windows. Elise's small laugh followed, sharp and practiced, and the table murmured with the kind of politeness that hides discomfort. I felt my pulse in my fingertips. I thought of every check I'd written, every favor granted, every night spent believing that love was still a two-way street. I reached for my wine, lifted it just high enough for my voice to steady. A toast. I said, to the last time you'll ever see me. The room went still. Clark's mouth opened, but no sound came. Elise's hand froze mid-air. The only movement was the candlelight flickering against the window pane. Dancing like something newly freed, I walked to the door. My coat unbuttoned, the night air biting at my throat. The snow had started falling again, quiet, absolute. Behind me, the house stayed silent. Ahead, the lake waited, dark and calm, like a mirror ready to show me who I'd become. That night, the lake disappeared behind a curtain of snow. I sat by the window, the plate of untouched turkey cooling beside me, and listened to the wind comb through the trees. The house, once full of laughter and footfalls, had never sounded so hollow. For 50 years. Thanksgiving had been mine to hold together. I could still see Clark as a boy, running through the kitchen with a paper pilgrim hat, his hands sticky with cranberry sauce. I remembered the years when the table stretched to fit neighbors, friends, anyone who had nowhere else to go. I'd cooked through flu, through power cuts, through grief. I had believed that tradition could protect us from distance. Tonight, it was proof that even rituals can rot. The phone buzzed on the counter. A single message from Elise glowed through the screen. You embarrassed him tonight. No greeting, no signature, just judgment in its simplest form. I deleted it without reading it twice. I poured a cup of tea, then reached for the leftover pie. The crust had gone soft, but it was still sweet. I ate it cold, standing by the counter because sitting felt too heavy. The heater hummed in the corner, its steady rhythm filling the space where voices used to live. The snow kept falling, pressing against the glass until the whole world looked erased. I thought about how easy it was for them to rewrite me, to turn years of giving into a single word, ungrateful. Maybe they didn't want a mother anymore, just a memory they could edit to their liking. I rinsed my plate, left the light on in the hallway, and wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. The silence felt sharper than anger, but it was honest. Outside, the frost clung to the windows like a reminder that warmth doesn't always come from family. By the time the clock struck midnight, I stopped waiting for an apology. I just wanted the truth to stop hurting. Morning came gray and slow, the kind of light that makes everything look fragile. I couldn't bring myself to turn on the radio or the phone. Instead, I pulled out the old accordion file from the cabinet beside my desk, a faded green thing that smelled faintly of dust and paper glue. Inside were decades of my life measured in numbers. There was Clark's first college tuition slip, the check stub for his wedding venue deposit, the bill from the hospital when his youngest had pneumonia. My handwriting filled the margins in blue ink paid, covered. Don't mention it. Each note was a small apology for wanting to be remembered. I set them in a neat pile on the table, then opened a new spiral-bound notebook. On the first page, I wrote in block letters, "Given, not returned." The pen hesitated for a moment before moving. Under each year, I listed what I'd given loans, gifts, things I'd told myself were love made visible. By noon, the stack of receipts looked like a quiet confession. My back ached, but I kept going. Somewhere between 2015 and 2017, a new document slipped out a bank statement from an account I hadn't touched in years. The letterhead bore Clark's company name beside mine, co-signer in bold. I traced the printed signature at the bottom, neat and curved, almost like mine, but not. I stared at it for a long time, trying to summon the memory of sitting in a bank office, signing papers, smiling for the sake of trust. Nothing came, only the dull awareness that something had been taken without asking. I pressed my palm against the page, feeling the raised ink as if touch could turn disbelief into proof. Maybe gratitude fades fastest when money remembers, I thought. I closed the file and sat still. The heater's hum steady behind me. Outside, the snow had stopped, but the cold had settled in for good. It was time to look closer at the papers, at the silence, at what love had cost me. The snow came heavier overnight, erasing the footprints that had led away from my porch. By morning, the driveway was a white field. I was halfway through struggling with the shovel when Jonas Weller appeared at the gate, his knit cap pulled low over his ears and a shovel of his own in hand. Jonas lived 2 houses down, a widower like me, quiet and methodical. He had once been a CPA before retiring from a firm in town, though you'd never know it unless taxes were mentioned. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, lifting a scoop of snow easily. "You'll wrench your back again." I wanted to protest, but the truth was, I was grateful for company that didn't need explaining. When we finished, I invited him in for tea. The kettle hissed as the kitchen filled with the smell of lemon and wood smoke. Maybe it was the warmth, or maybe I was tired of hearing only my own thoughts. But I told him about the strange bank document, the signature that wasn't mine. Jonas listened the way only people who have seen too many ledgers do still. Focused. No interruption. When I finished, he adjusted his glasses. "Do you mind if I check something?" He opened his tablet, fingers moving with quiet certainty. "Let's look at the county property registry. Most records are public now." It took only a moment before his brows drew together. "Here," he said softly, turning the screen toward me. There it was, my cabin listed as collateral on a business loan dated last year. The borrower, Clark Ashford Innovations, LLC. My name gleamed in neat digital ink beside his. I leaned closer, tracing the screen as if the letters might rearrange themselves into another truth. Jonas didn't rush me. After a long silence, he said, "Meriel, this isn't an accident." The words settled heavier than the snow outside. I felt the ground tilt slightly, not from fear, but from something clearer, a slow, steady anger beginning to thaw beneath the ice. By morning, the lake had turned to glass, thin ice forming at its edges. I didn't sleep much, but I knew what I had to do. Jonas was waiting by his truck, the engine already running, the heat fogging the windshield. He'd called ahead to the branch manager at Burlington Savings. Told them we needed to review a questionable document. Inside, the bank smelled of polished wood and winter coats. The young officer at the desk, her name tag read C. Hollins looked at me with the polite unease of someone trained to smile through trouble. Jonas explained what we'd found on the county registry. She nodded slowly, then said, "Those records are confidential. We can't disclose details without authorization." I reached into my purse, laid my driver's license and the original statement on her desk. "Then let's authorize it properly," I said, keeping my voice steady. "That's my name on a document I didn't sign. You can check my ID, my handwriting, even the pen I use." The young woman hesitated, glanced toward her supervisor's office, then stood. "I'll be right back, Mrs. Ashford." When she returned, she carried a form a single page titled Affidavit of Forgery. My signature shook slightly as I wrote it, but the ink bled with finality. The supervisor, a tall man with rimless glasses, came to the desk. "We can pull the log data," he said carefully. "Each digital signature leaves a trace device, time, and IP address." He clicked through several screens before turning the monitor toward me. There it was again. Signature recorded Clark, Ashford at Innovations LLC.com. Timestamp, April 16, 2022, 3:42 p.m. The room went silent. I stared at the line until the numbers blurred. I had been home that day, pruning the lilacs by the porch. Clark had texted then, saying he'd call later. He hadn't mentioned the bank. Jonas laid a hand on my shoulder, grounding me back to the floor. The officer's voice was quiet. "Mrs. Ashford, this qualifies as identity theft. We'll open a case immediately. Outside." The cold air felt sharper, truer. My breath came fast. Clouds fading into the wind. I whispered to no one. He took more than the cabin. He took my trust. Jonas insisted on driving me to meet the attorney. The snow had thinned to slush by then, gray and tired, the kind that leaves streaks on windshields and boots. He waited in the lobby while I sat across from Lorna Pike. A woman with silver hair pulled into a clean twist and an expression that measured everything before it spoke. Her office smelled faintly of pine cleaner and old paper, a place where truth was handled carefully. Not rushed. She read the documents I brought, the affidavit, the registry printout, the bank's confirmation. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but not with surprise. "You'd be shocked how often this happens," she said. "Children signing for parents, thinking it's harmless, until it isn't." Lorna began drafting papers with the certainty of someone who has done this many times before revocation of power of attorney, so no one could act under my name again. Transfer freeze notice. Locking the cabin from further use as collateral. Fraud report to the Vermont Banking Commission. Each form carried weight. Each stroke of the pen felt like reclaiming a breath I hadn't realized I'd lost. When I hesitated over one line, she looked up. "He'll call it revenge," she said evenly. "Don't answer that call. This isn't anger. It's repair." The word repair settled somewhere deep. When the signatures were done, I folded a sheet of my own, a letter I had written that morning, rewritten twice until it sounded like me again. "Clark, you called me ungrateful. I simply stopped giving." "Mom." I sealed it without rereading, slid it into my purse. Outside, Jonas opened the passenger door for me, his usual small kindness unspoken. We stopped by the post office on the way home. The envelope slipped easily through the brass slot, landing with a sound too soft for what it carried. The air was brittle and bright when I stepped back outside. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I didn't feel small. I felt exact. The knock came hard enough to rattle the porch glass. I didn't need to look through the window to know who it was. Only Clark hit a door like he wanted to teach it a lesson. He was still in his city coat, expensive and thin, unsuited for the wind that swept off the lake. "We need to talk," he said. stepping inside before I could answer. His face was flushed, his voice already shaking. Do you have any idea what you've done? The bank froze my accounts. Investors are asking questions. You've ruined my reputation. I folded the dish towel I'd been holding, set it neatly on the counter. No. Clark. You did that yourself. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and slapped it onto the table. This is the only way to fix it. His words carried that clipped tone he used when speaking to subordinates. It's a family settlement. You sign this. We'll make it all go away. I opened the folder. Legal phrases swam across the page. All in the language of erasure. One sentence caught my eye. Permanent waiver of ownership in exchange for family reconciliation. I read it aloud. The words tasting like metal. Reconciliation doesn't need signatures, I said quietly, sliding the papers back across the table. He looked at me then not as a son, but as someone cornered. His voice cracked under its own weight. I just wanted to build something for my kids, something that lasts. I met his eyes, then teach them that theft builds nothing. For a moment, the air went still. The house seemed to hold its breath with me. Clark's jaw tightened. The anger in his face faltered into something smaller, something that looked like shame. He grabbed the papers, crumpled them halfway, and turned toward the door. I was trying to help, he muttered, not looking back. The wind caught the screen door as he left, slamming it against the frame. I stood there, hearing the sound fade into the distance. Outside, the snow had begun again slow, deliberate flakes settling over the frozen ground, covering every footprint that led away from home. The news broke quietly. The way winter sunlight sneaks through gray clouds, a clerk from the county office called first, her voice hesitant but kind. Mrs. Ashford, your case has been entered into public record, she said. It's part of a broader review on elder identity theft. You may want to be prepared for attention. By afternoon, I saw my name in print, small, factual, surrounded by others who'd been deceived by people they trusted. The Burlington Gazette headline read, Elder Identity Theft, Rising Across Vermont. Beneath it, a single sentence stood out. Local resident Meriel Ashford filed a report leading to pending charges against a private tech firm co-owned by her son. I set the paper down. My tea had gone cold. Jonas knocked on the door not long after, a paper bag in his hands and the smell of cinnamon trailing behind him. You've made the news, he said, setting the rolls on the counter. His tone carried something like pride, though his eyes stayed gentle. Looks like you've started a movement. I smiled, though it felt faint, almost unfamiliar. No, I said. I just ended a silence. Outside, the lake wind howled, scattering yesterday's snow into spirals. The phone rang a few times that week, reporters, lawyers, even one of Clark's investors trying to verify details, but I didn't answer. I didn't owe the world my story. I had already told it where it mattered. When word reached me that Elise had resigned from her charity board, citing personal matters, I felt no satisfaction. Only the slow settling of truth where it belonged. Clark's company page went dark the next day. Investors pulled out quietly, leaving nothing but empty praise statements and polite denials. That evening, Jonas stayed for coffee. We didn't talk about Clark or lawsuits or anything with weight. He asked if I'd ever considered teaching bookkeeping at the community center. I laughed softly. I suppose I've learned a thing or two about keeping records. I said, outside, the snow eased, and for the first time in months, the night didn't feel heavy at all. By spring, the snow melted into soft ribbons that ran down to the lake. The air carried that faint smell of thawing earth and maple sap. Life resumed its small, steady rhythm, quiet, deliberate, the way it always does after storms. One afternoon, as I sorted through the mail, I found an envelope addressed in careful handwriting. No return address, just my name in blue ink. Inside was a short letter, signed by Ivy, Clark's eldest daughter. Dear Grandma, I miss you. Dad says things are complicated, but I just miss how your house smelled like cinnamon and books. I hope you're okay. I read it 3 times before folding it neatly. My heart felt both lighter and heavier. The child had inherited her father's neatness, but not his armor. I sat at my desk, stared at a blank card for a long time before writing, "My door is open when respect is. Love, Grandma." I sealed it and let it rest in the outbox until the next morning, unsure whether to mail it. By sunrise, I decided that love, like forgiveness, shouldn't stay unfinished. That Sunday, the cottage filled again, but with different laughter. Jonas arrived first, carrying a pie still warm from the oven. Lorna followed with a basket of rolls. And 2 of my old library friends brought a salad they'd mostly forgotten to dress. We ate at the old dining table, the same one that had once divided my family. Tonight, it held no judgment, just mismatched plates and honest conversation. When the plates were cleared, Jonas poured tea into my chipped porcelain cups. He raised his glass, eyes crinkling. "To gratitude," he said, "the kind that goes both ways." The others joined in, and the sound of their laughter filled the room like the scent of pine after rain. I looked at the empty chair across from me, not with sadness, but with a quiet hope that one day it might not be empty at all. The lake outside shimmered faintly under the evening light, steady, forgiving, and entirely my own. The mornings had turned soft again, the kind where mist rose off the lake like breath from a sleeping animal. I carried my cup of coffee down to the dock, the planks damp beneath my slippers, and sat where the wood met the water. The air was still, filled only with the calls of distant loons and the faint lap of waves against the shore. Across the inlet, the cabin stood whole and quiet. The county had restored the deed weeks ago, my name alone printed clean on the document. I'd framed it in the hall beside an old photograph of Clark as a boy, holding a paper sailboat he once made from my grocery lists. I couldn't bring myself to take it down. Some memories deserve to stay, even when they ache. I sipped my coffee and let the warmth settle in my hands. The world felt new, but not empty. The maple trees had begun to bud, the same way they did every April, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Maybe that was the truth of survival. It never announces itself. It just keeps returning. The lake mirrored the sky, still and certain. I spoke to it as if it were listening. "You called me ungrateful," I said quietly, watching the steam drift from my cup. But gratitude was never the problem. Ownership was. The words didn't sound bitter anymore. They felt like balance, like naming something that had long gone unnamed. I reached into my pocket and took out the small silver key that had once opened the cabin door. Its edges were worn smooth from years of use. I held it for a moment, then let it slip from my fingers. It hit the water with a quiet drop, vanishing beneath the surface. Ripples spread outward gentle, deliberate until the lake stilled again. When I rose, the sunlight had found its way through the mist, laying a golden path across the dock. I followed it back toward the house, one step at a time, feeling the rare, certain weight of peace.